John Coventry, and he's leaving soon back to Australia, so we're going to miss him.
Oh, man.
We'll give you the permission.
Like very soon. And, anyways, so today we asked John to speak about the effect of movies on the subconscious mind, the subconscious mind, and other things that he's going to tell us about now.
Thanks, Ron. Alright. Hello. Okay, so we'll start off with a TED Talk. And after the TED Talk, I want to try to get you to compare some of your own behaviours to what we talk about in the TED Talk, or is spoken about in the TED Talk. TED Talk is about movies and a particular thing called Film Club that was started in the UK, and it's this essentially club at schools, at high schools, where students would be shown a movie, like in its entirety, and then afterwards they would discuss it. So, like the details will come in and you can see it for yourselves, but I want to try and compare that to what we do. So.
Evidence suggests that humans in all ages and from all cultures create their identity in some kind of narrative form. From mother to daughter, preacher to congregant, teacher to pupil, storyteller to audience, whether in cave paintings or the latest uses of the internet, human beings have always told their histories and truths through parable and fable. We are inveterate storytellers. But where, in our increasingly secular and fragmented world, do we offer communality of experience, unmediated by our own furious consumerism? And what narrative, what history, what identity, what moral code are we imparting to our young? Cinema is arguably the 20th century's most influential art form. Its artists told stories across national boundaries, in as many languages, genres and philosophies as one can imagine. Indeed, it is hard to find a subject that film has yet to tackle. During the last decade, we've seen a vast integration of global media, now dominated by a culture of the Hollywood blockbuster. We are increasingly offered a diet in which sensation, not story, is king. What was common to us all 40 years ago, the telling of stories between generations, is now rarefied. As a filmmaker, it worried me. As a human being, it puts the fear of God in me. What future could the young build with so little grasp of where they've come from and so few narratives of what's possible? The irony is palpable. Technical access has never been greater. Cultural access, never weaker. And so, in 2006, we set up Film Club, an organisation that ran weekly film screenings in schools, followed by discussions. If we could raid the annals of 100 years of film, maybe we could build a narrative that would deliver meaning to the fragmented and restless world of the young. Given the access to technology, even a school in a tiny rural hamlet could project a DVD onto a whiteboard. In the first 9 months, we ran 25 clubs across the UK, with kids in age groups between 5 and 18 watching a film uninterrupted for 90 minutes. The films were curated and contextualised, but the choice was theirs, and our audience quickly grew to choose the richest and most varied diet that we could provide. The outcome? Immediate. It was an education of the most profound and transformative kind. In groups as large as 150 and as small as 3, these young people discovered new places, new thoughts, new perspectives. By the time the pilot had finished, we had the names of 1,000 schools that wished to join. The film that changed my life is a 1951 film by Vittorio De Sica, Miracle in Milan. It's a remarkable comment on slums, poverty and aspiration. I had seen the film on the occasion of my father's 50th birthday. Technology then meant we had to hire a viewing cinema, find and pay for the print and the projectionist. But for my father, the emotional and artistic importance of De Sica's vision was so great that he chose to celebrate his half-century with his 3 teenage children and 30 of their friends, in order, he said, to pass the baton of concern and hope on to the next generation. In the last shot of Miracle in Milan, slum dwellers float skyward on flying brooms. 60 years after the film was made and 30 years after I first saw it, I see young faces tilt up in awe, their incredulity matching mine, and the speed with which they associated with Slumdog Millionaire or the Flaveyas in Rio speaks to the enduring nature. In a film club season about democracy and government, we screened Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Made in 1939, the film is older than most of our members' grandparents. Frank Capra's classic values independence and propriety. It shows how to do right, how to be heroically awkward. It is also an expression of faith in the political machine as a force of honour. Shortly after Mr. Smith became a film club classic, there was a week of all-night filibustering in the House of Lords, and it was with great delight that we found young people up and down the country explaining with authority what filibustering was and why the Lords might defy their bedtime on a point of principle. After all, Jimmy Stewart filibustered for 2 entire reels. In choosing Hotel Rwanda, they explored genocide of the most brutal kind. It provoked tears as well as incisive questions about unarmed peacekeeping forces and the double dealing of a Western society that picks its moral fights with commodities in mind. And when Schindler's List demanded that they never forget, one child, full of the pain of consciousness, remarked, "We already forgot, otherwise how did Hotel Rwanda happen?" As they watched more films, their life got palpably richer. Pickpockets started a debate about criminality, disenfranchisement. To Serve Love ignited its teen audience. They celebrated a change in attitude towards non-white Britons, but railed against our restless school system that does not value collective identity, unlike that offered by Sidney Poitier's careful tutelage. By now, these thoughtful, opinionated, curious young people thought nothing of tackling films of all forms, black and white, subtitle, documentary, non-narrative, fantasy, and thought nothing of writing detailed reviews that competed to favour one film over another in passionate and increasingly sophisticated prose. 6,000 reviews each school week, vying for the honour of being Review of the Week. From 25 clubs, we became hundreds, then thousands, until we were nearly 250,000 kids in 7,000 clubs right across the country. And although the numbers were and continue to be extraordinary, what became more extraordinary was how the experience of critical and curious questioning translated into life. Some of our kids started talking with their parents, others with their teachers or with their friends, and those without friends started making them. The films provided communality across all manner of divide, and the stories they held provided a shared experience. Persepolis brought a daughter closer to her Iranian mother. And Jaws became the way in which one young boy was able to articulate the fear he'd experienced in flight from violence that killed first his father, then his mother, the latter thrown overboard on a boat journey. Who was right, who wrong? What would they do under the same conditions? Was the tale told well? Was there a hidden message? How has the world changed? How could it be different? A tsunami of questions flew out of the mouths of children who the world didn't think were interested, and they themselves had not known they cared. And as they wrote and debated, rather than seeing the films as artifacts, they began to see themselves. I have an aunt who's a wonderful storyteller. In a moment she can invoke images of running barefoot in Table Mountain, playing cops and robbers. Quite recently she told me that In 1948, 2 of her sisters and my father travelled on a boat to Israel without my grandparents. When the sailors mutinied at sea in a demand for humane conditions, it was these teenagers that fed the crew. I was past 40 when my father died. He never mentioned that journey. My mother's mother left Europe in a hurry, without her husband, but with her 3-year-old daughter and diamonds sewn into the hem of her skirt. After 2 years in hiding, my grandfather appeared in London. He was never right again, and his story was hushed as he assimilated. My story started in England with a clean slate and the silence of immigrant parents. I had Anne Frank, The Great Escape, Shoah, Triumph of the Will. It was Leni Riefenstahl in her elegant Nazi propaganda who gave context to what the family had to endure. These films held what was too hurtful to say out loud, and they became more useful to me than the whispers of survivors and the occasional glimpse of a tattoo on a maiden aunt's wrist. Purists may feel that fiction dissipates the quest of real human understanding, that film is too crude to tell a complex and detailed history, or that filmmakers always serve drama over truth. But within the reels lie purpose and meaning. As one 12-year-old said after watching Wizard of Oz, every person should watch this because unless you do, you may not know that you too have a heart. We honour reading, why not honour watching with the same passion? Consider Citizen Kane as valuable as Jane Austen. Agree that Boys in the Hood, like Tennyson, offers an emotional landscape and a heightened understanding that work together. Each a piece of memorable art, each a brick in the wall of who we are. And it's okay if we remember Tom Hanks better than astronaut Jim Lovell, or have Ben Kingsley's face superimposed onto that of Gandhi's, and though not real, Eve Harrington, Howard Beale, Mildred Pierce are an opportunity to discover what it is to be human. And no less helpful to understanding our life and times as Shakespeare is in illuminating the world of Elizabethan England. We guessed that film, whose stories are a meeting place of drama, music, literature, and human experience, would engage and inspire the young people participating in Film Club. What we could not have foreseen was the measurable improvements in behaviour, confidence, and academic achievement. Once reluctant students now race to school, talk to their teachers, fight not in the playground but to choose next week's film. Young people who have found self-definition, ambition, and an appetite for education and social engagement from the stories they have witnessed. Our members defy the binary description of how we so often describe our young. They are neither feral nor myopically self-absorbed. They are, like other young people, negotiating a world with infinite choice, but little culture of how to find meaningful experience. We appeared surprised at the behaviours of those who define themselves by the size of the tick on their shoes, yet acquisition has been the narrative we have offered. If we want different values, we have to tell a different story. A story that understands that an individual narrative is an essential component of a person's identity, that a collective narrative is an essential component of a cultural identity, and without it, it is impossible to imagine yourself as part of a group, because when these people get home after a screening of Rear Window and raise their gaze to the building next door, they have the tools to wonder who, apart from them, is out there and what is their story. Thank you.
Thoughts? Yeah, it was good, right? Yeah, okay. Any other thoughts besides that? Like, that's probably the most important for the life. Does anyone want to try to flesh that out?
I liked everything she said, but then I kept thinking that today, like in 2017, the movies that are coming out are actually not as meaningful as most movies she's highlighted.
Right.
And like, even this year, I can't remember even wanting to go to the theater for anything meaningful, or even like comedy that is actually comedy and not just full of like sex scenes or insults or like nudity, whatever. So it's like, it's a quarter of the coin. It's not even half of the coin. Like, that's my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. And she did make the point. We had to search through 100 years worth of films, and like not just that. When they gave students the option, so like I'm not sure how carefully you were listening. She made the point saying the films were curated and contextualized, so they were put in their context, but also the students were given a choice. And she said, like very quickly, the students chose the most rich and varied set of films that they could, right? So it's kind of perfect that they weren't choosing recent releases, right? Like it was good that they got away from that for exactly the point that you're saying. Yeah. Okay, any other thoughts?
I think she said, like at the end or throughout, it shapes their identity and makes all the like communicating or something one with them and one with others. So it's part, whatever they see becomes like part of their identity and who they are.
Right, so the movies that they were watching became internalized, right? Like they started to think differently, they started to act differently, right? Her words, not mine. So, okay, yeah, like 100%. It was, so right towards the end when she was saying, what was it? The idea of adults getting upset at kids for how they care about, you know, how big the Nike tick on their shoes are. I mean, it's weird because what stories are we feeding them? I mean, she said, if we want to change values, we need to change the stories that we're providing. Does that make sense? Okay, any other thoughts? Okay, sweet. So those are initial reactions. Awesome. Now, the thing that I wanted to get to. So we already began to pick at this, but I want you to try and think hard. How does that, the film club and everything that they were doing, how does that differ from what we, as individuals in this room, usually encounter when we watch movies? And let's broaden it out. Movies and series, because series is the big thing now, right? Like we have Netflix, I don't know, like this was since, I'm pretty sure since I was in uni, and we're talking like 15 years ago. No, less than that, like 12 years ago. It's still a long time, yeah. Yeah, like it's not that much of a difference. But I remember like when I was studying, I think it was like second year uni, in order to help myself, like in order to help me motivate myself, I would like do 2 lectures and then I'd watch a series of something and then do another 2 lectures and then 3 episodes and then 1 lecture, and you know, by the end of it, yeah, like by the end of it I was just watching seasons, yeah, and like subjects were being failed, that's right. Not great, but I mean I think seasons, or a series, I think that would be just as, if not more important, to include than just movies. Would that be fair to say? Yeah. Okay, sweet. So how does our watching, our entertainment, how does that differ from what they were doing? Anything?
Mainly, we don't have a set goal, like while we're watching this movie, maybe while we're just watching to have fun or just like to get whatever. But
Right.
those are watching to have just study on one thing. So one of the movies that we have here, like was put here, like when they wanted to be a debate between my team and one of them got another church.
Yeah.
So I watched this movie 2 times. One time before I go to a class, and one time it was when I was in a human behavior class.
Right.
And the two ways were really different. That's why the teacher tells, okay, I want you to watch the movie and tell me what did you get. And
Right.
then when we came to the class, it's like, okay, we finished the whole lecture, and then it was okay. Compare this to whatever you think today to whatever you saw in the movie.
100%. So there was critical analysis of the movies. Like I don't usually watch Game of Thrones and then write an essay, right? Well, like, not an essay on that. Like, as you're studying, you're probably writing essays in between. But like, the idea is that I'm not critically analysing what I'm watching. Yeah? Yeah, one massive difference. So they had discussions set after, they would watch the movie, had discussions set after, and again, there was like one other step. They had to write reviews, and reviews were put into competition all around the UK, and so they were vying for week's best review. Okay, so yeah, critical evaluation of what we're watching, we don't do. They did that. Any other difference?
Well, just to add to what he said, it was meaningful, so they gained something out of it compared to like the movie that we watched today. Like, what do we learn from them?
Do you think, like, just open question, there's no like solid answer that I have. Do you think that's because the quality of movies that are being produced now are rubbish compared to back in the day? Or is it because of the way that we approach it, or a bit of both? What do you reckon? Yeah, like it might not be like a blanket rule to say everything being produced now is rubbish, but the way that we approach it, we're not exactly doing the same thing that they're doing. Yeah, okay, I would agree with that.
I'm sure that there's like really good movies that are being produced, but it's not being brought to our attention as much. Like whatever is available on Netflix is kind of like, you're just gonna pick whatever's on there, or whatever's at the movies. Like, it takes some research for you to get a movie that's educative.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like we have, like of all the movies being produced, of all the series being produced, we see a subset of those, and then we choose of those. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, easy access.
Exactly. Any other ideas?
Yeah, I just want to add on Yara's point. Like, honestly, it's true, and I think they want to show us what we want, not really what we need.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a lot like that. It's like, and it's always the same message, you know what I mean?
Right, because I mean, if I want to make money, I'm not going to be pushing a particular message, and if I don't care about money, I can push whatever message I want. Right? Yeah.
Also, I think.
Yeah, you're one.
Also, I think nowadays people are more attracted to like visual effects, sensorial effects, rather than like, I don't know, historical backgrounds and storylines. It takes, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but probably it takes a lot more effort for a movie maker to go dig into the historical events and all that, rather than just create a visual effect and like explosions and whatever, and it just attracts more viewers and we make the money and that's it. So
she mentioned that like towards the beginning of the video, right, where she was talking about sensation over story. Yeah, like the film industry has sometimes been accused of preferring sensation over story. Agree? Disagree? Yeah? Okay.
And I also find with series, like, you come back home from work, you're tired, you just want to like zone out, not think too much. You just want something that's like, not garbage, but just whatever. And everything is like 20 minutes. So it's like very easy to be like, it's just 20 minutes of my time, who cares, you know? And you're like, it's just another 20 minutes of my time.
Yeah.
Oh, technically it's just an hour and a half, it's not a big deal, you know?
Right, yeah, so the time thing was something that was interesting to me. So the idea of, did you remember how long they were saying all the movies were? Yeah, so it was 90 minutes of watching a movie uninterrupted. I love that, like when are these kids doing this? But, like, what classes are being...
Where was that in high school?
Yeah, I know, right? But, you know, okay, so they have 90 minutes and a bit more to chat, but, you know, whatever. They have the 90 minutes. Right, so when we watch series, I mean, yeah, are we watching less or more, or what's... Right, it's more, yeah? Not necessarily because of the one sitting, although the binge watching is a big issue, right? Like, how many people have waited for a season or an entire series to come out before you start, because you know that if you start halfway through, you're going to get frustrated because, you know, the story's not finished. You need an entire story. So it might start when they've finished the end of season 9, right? Some people have, some don't, whatever. But the idea is that, you know, we binge watch now. It's not, I don't know, back in the day. I don't know how many of you guys remember back in the day, you know, you record your 30-minute show and that's it. You've got to wait till next week. Like, I don't know, maybe the youngest kids are like freaking out over that concept, but that you would have to wait, yeah. But yeah, so binge watching is a big thing, right? So we spend more time involved in these stories, whether it be in the one setting or over a longer amount of time. Either way, we're spending more time indulged in these stories than the 90 minutes. Okay, any other differences?
Even before, like, in the past, like, there was maybe like in the cinema, like maximum 2-3 movies per a good part. So now I think it's 1 or 2 every month, or like it's not like maybe like.
Oh, like how often the movies are
yeah,
being
so
produced?
it's became like before it was like quality over quantity, but now it became quantity over quality.
I think like the main difference is like when like these movies that she's referencing back then when it was still fresh, I think the movie industry was mainly like an art form that was respected, but now it's more of a money-making thing, and it's recreational purposes rather than art. So I think the good productions are still being made, but they're diluted in so many other things that are made only for recreational purposes. So it's probably like the main thing. It's not really, I don't know.
Sorry, so you were saying like it's still hard.
I
Right.
sort of disagree. It still takes a lot of art to get some of these movies out there on the screen to attract viewers. But I kind of feel that some of the values in our culture or in our society sort of changed or sort of are now they're becoming a lot gutsier to throw things on the screen, and people are saying things like, it's always heterosexual. You're not respecting our rights, and then now Disney has to show a little bit of everything. So I think there's a lot of
like there's a lot of political sort of interplay into what's like worth being shown, what's not, what's sort of in vogue, what's not. Right. Okay.
He said attraction of the viewers, and I think that's like the main difference is the viewers now. It's like back then and now, yeah, like the values, they completely changed.
Right.
We're not the same, like we don't like the same things anymore. Black and white movies, that's not even a thing anymore, you know?
Although, so what I found interesting is like you've got kids in high school who are choosing to watch like Citizen Kane, and like did you like this is like no one cares about these. I care about this a little bit, but this is just a side note. Did you guys recognize the movies that were being shown?
Some.
Some? Yeah.
Just one out of like thousands that was.
Right. Like who didn't recognize the majority? Who didn't recognize the majority?
Did not recognize.
Yeah, like recognize the minority of movies. Yeah? Yeah. Right, so there were a lot of movies being shown and not a lot that we're familiar with, right? Yeah, 100%. Like it matters what we're being given or what we actually want to see. But if you listen carefully, she was saying that the movies were curated and contextualized. So curated as in a museum, the museum curator decides what to show, not by choosing every single selection, not by choosing the one thing that you're going to be watching, but by choosing a selection and saying, okay, you choose, you go see what you want to see out of these, right? So when they were showing, I forget what the movie was, but it was one where they used the term filibustering. Does anyone know what that term means? Okay. Yep. So it's like it's when I think in the UK, I don't know, the House of Lords, when they get together all night and they're having an argument like well into the night about something. So they're delaying making a political decision, and it's taking a massive amount of time. Yeah. And so she was saying like, not only did kids understand the word now, which is awesome, but they understand why politicians would actually care enough about an issue to stay up late enough to actually be doing this filibustering. But when she was talking about that particular film, curated. Sorry, absolutely forgot what I was saying. Yes, sorry. So it was about that time where she was saying that there was a season, or there was a series of movies, or a period of time where they were showing specific, or showing movies specific to government or like You know, do you guys remember that? Okay, awesome, sorry, so I'm not just ranting off the top of my head. Okay, so there was a set selection of types of movies, so it was kind of easier to diversify it, whereas for us, when we're watching things, we're not always diversifying as much. Yeah? Okay, sweet. Now, what are your thoughts on how effective those movies were in changing the way students thought and acted? Did it seem convincing that, you know, watching those movies was actually helping kids change the way that they think and act?
I think it's very powerful. Like, I remember certain movies that have impacted my choices and what I want to study or what I want to focus on. And it's not just me being naive. Like that kid said, she quoted a kid that said everyone should watch this because it will surprise that everyone has a heart. Certain movies will affect people, and I think that's vital. But to like add on to what everyone was saying, I do think it's an art, but I do think it's based on supply and demand, and that's based on us and what we want to see. But what she was saying is that her conclusion was essentially, we always say like kids, like they don't know, right? They don't know what they're wearing these like fancy shoes and blah, blah, blah. But if we actually give them the proper tools, we would be surprised. So I feel like it's just a shame that because it's based on supply and demand, the little guy that wants to show a movie about what's happening in Rwanda won't get funded for it and we'll never see it. Or it's just not publicized the right way.
Right.
So it's kind of like, it's a vicious circle.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so then do you, Colin.
I just want to know, what does this have to do with Christianity and God?
Getting to that point shortly. Almost present. Actually, almost in the next sentence, so perfect time. So now the question was, if we're seeing in a secular sort of environment that movies are influencing not just the way that kids think and act, but I mean, you know, the way that they interact with each other, their parents, their teachers, etc. If we're seeing that that is something that's influencing them, and that's 90 minutes, curated, diverse, etc. For us, we were saying it's more than 90 minutes, not diverse, and the quality is not always, you know, up to what God would want us to have. If we're saying that, does it not stand to reason that perhaps the movies that we're watching, the series that we're watching are influencing us in a particular way, in the way that we act, the way that we think, the way that we interact with other people? Does that make sense? Okay, sweet. So worth considering what we're watching. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Now, I mean, that's one thing, like to say, consider what you're watching. But at the same time, we don't want to just stop with saying, don't watch A, B, and C. Okay? Because part of the reason that, you know, we have all these movies in front of us, part of the reason I want to watch A, B, and C is because it's good, it's enjoyable, etc. So you're leaving me with just rubbish, right? You're leaving me with the things that I wouldn't choose to watch. Okay? So I think it's worth thinking about what we should sort of engage with, what sort of stories, what sort of narratives are worth spending our time with. Okay? So, let's move on to sort of